Just about everyone who is sick is looking for a silver bullet cure that will conquer their disease and restore health. As people searching for answers to our health problems, we spend countless hours researching, hoping to finally find the answer to our chronic illness. Scientists, health researchers, and doctors spend years and decades and millions and even billions of dollars searching for that one pill or drug that will finally cure every person with that disease. Well, unfortunately, I believe that the idea that there is one single drug that will finally cure every person with a given disease is largely a myth. Some modern examples of efforts in this field that have largely turned out to be disappointing would be Alzheimer's disease and depression. From a MedPage Today article, 40 years of Alzheimer's research failure, now what? The author says that 4 decades of intense research and development efforts have failed to yield any effective interventions for neurodegenerative diseases. The lack of success in the search for a drug to improve the devastating symptoms of these chronic brain disorders has been one of modern medicine's greatest frustrations, with a failure rate of nearly 99.6% as compared with about 20% success rate for cancer drugs. And in a research paper published in the British Medical Journal evaluating the response to monotherapy for major depressive disorder, which means single drug therapy for that disease, they found, after reviewing 232 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, that only about 15% of all the participants in those studies have a substantial antidepressant effect beyond a placebo effect in clinical trials, which is a far cry from the 100% response rate we would like to see. Because of these 2 types of examples, and there are certainly many more that we could go on to talk about, a lot of researchers in the modern medical field are starting to move away from the idea of a silver bullet cure for these diseases, and instead are going down a route of what is now known as precision medicine or personalized medicine. So what is precision medicine? According to the FDA's website, most medical treatments are designed for the average patient as a one-size-fits-all approach, which may be successful for some patients but not for others. Precision medicine, sometimes known as personalized medicine, is an innovative approach to tailoring disease prevention and treatment that takes into account differences in people's genes, environments, and lifestyles. The goal of precision medicine is to target the right treatments to the right patients at the right time. Now, this is quite a different approach from a silver bullet, one drug cures all kind of endeavor, isn't it? And I'm sure many of you watching this have had some kind of experience like this where one medication or one specific supplement works really well for someone else you know with the same condition you have, but when you try it, you either don't feel anything positive from it or don't get the same good results they did, and sometimes even feel worse overall from taking it. This is already an example of precision health in practice. However, as you're about to learn in this video, the idea of precision health and personalized medicine is not a new concept at all, but is actually one that homeopathy has been using since the late 1700s. So all of this introduction sets the stage for the topic of this video, which is choosing the homeopathic remedy. This is the 3rd video in my Homeopathy 101 series. This series is designed to give a complete introduction to the ins and outs of homeopathy, especially from a client or a patient's perspective, so that anyone can be accurately informed on what this unique approach can offer. My first video in this series covered some of the most common misconceptions about homeopathy and tried to set the record straight. My previous video covered the ins and outs of one of the most important aspects of homeopathy and something that sets it apart from every other type of health approach out there, which is the homeopathic intake. What kind of information do we need to help someone with homeopathy, and how do we go about getting it? One of the main things I talked about in that video is the vital importance of the health practitioner or the homeopath having a complete and detailed understanding of all of a client's health conditions that's bringing them in. One of the biggest things that separates homeopathy from other approaches is the thoroughness with which we go through our client's health problems and the details we gather. Often, this initial homeopathic intake can go between 2 and even 4 hours, and in it we go through very specific details of a person's health concerns, such as very precise locations of where the concerns are, the specific sensations that they feel, whether that's pain sensations or other discomfortable sensations, things that make the condition any better or any worse, even things that, we don't typically think about. And then other aspects of a person's kind of sensitivities, such as their typical mood disposition, their reaction to stress, their weather preferences, temperature preferences, can be food and drink preferences, etc. So the logical question when we're going through this information is, well, what am I, the homeopath, actually going to use it for? How are we going to use it in order to help the client or the patient heal? So I started to answer this question in my last video, so I'm going to return to a clip of that right now to get a little introduction to it, and then we'll go through some more concrete examples. And to put this in even more concrete terms, as homeopaths, we have hundreds and even thousands of different homeopathic remedies at our disposal. Now, the question is, out of all these hundreds and thousands of remedies, how do we actually choose which single homeopathic remedy we want to use at a given time for a client? So fundamentally, it starts by gathering this complete case that I've been describing so far. And then for every different homeopathic remedy, we also have a very thorough, complete list of all the types of conditions it helps, the specific locations it's more apt to help, and the specific types of modalities that it's more able to assist with. As we gather more and more details from our clients, we are simultaneously narrowing the field of possible remedies that match what's going on with them. The ultimate goal is to arrive at the single remedy that best matches what's going on with the client. And in homeopathy, we call this the simillimum, which is best able to stimulate the client's internal healing response in order to restore health. So what does this mean in practice? The symptoms that are most important for choosing the homeopathic remedy are those symptoms that are most consistently occurring in a person's life, the ones that are most bothersome to them on their day-to-day life, and also the ones that are most well-defined. Symptoms that are both consistent and bothersome, but not very well-defined, are not usually as helpful for finding the right remedy as the more well-defined symptoms are. Well-defined in this context means we have a specific location to the symptom, a specific sensation or a specific character of the symptom, as well as specific modalities to the symptom, meaning we know what kind of makes that symptom any better or makes it any worse. The easiest way to get a better understanding of this is for us to go through an example together. So this is actually how I would start to analyze a case in order to recommend a specific remedy. On my screen, I'm showing you what is called a repertory. Now, in simple terms, a repertory is a book that contains all the different symptoms that the different homeopathic remedies can help with. Now, just to give some quick context, this particular repertory I'm using in this example has symptoms for 2,126 different remedies and is several thousand pages long. Now, the reason for using a repertory is because without a program like this, it would be impossible to keep track of all the different symptoms that can be helped with our homeopathic remedies because the literature is just too vast to have them all memorized. So as an example, let's take a case here with someone with a sore throat. If I only know that they have pain in their throat and I don't have any more specific locations to that, any more specific sensations to that, or any specific kind of modalities that make that pain any better or any worse, you can see here what that will look like. So we're in the throat section, we go to pain, and we can see there's 543 remedies that produce pain in the throat. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm between 2,000 remedies or 543 remedies, I'm still feeling pretty far off from hitting the bullseye. So let's figure out what happens if I have more information from this person, which is why we take such an in-depth case. So say I can get from them that the pain isn't just in the throat, but specifically on the right side of the throat. Let's see what happens then. So we'll get rid of this. We'll get a little more information on the pain in terms of location. And now pain on the right side, already we are getting closer because now we're actually down to only 71 different remedies possible. So that's good. Now, the other types of well-defined that I talked about before, we have the location, we have the sensation. You know, a lot of times with throat pain, different sensations would be things like a burning pain or a stabbing pain or a scraped and kind of raw pain. In this hypothetical case, the person doesn't really sure if it's scraping, burning, etc. They just know it hurts a lot. So we'll stick with that. But in this case, they do have a modality, which is that breathing in cold air makes the pain worse. Okay, well, that's probably pretty good because not every single person with a sore throat is going to be worse from breathing in cold air. So let's see what happens if I can add that symptom in through my repertory here. So air, cold, right? And now aggravate. So already we can see it's a pretty good rubric. There's only 24 remedies in here. And now if I add both of these in, my next thing is to go to kind of my graph here, which Again, these at the top are all different remedies that are in our Materia Medica. And you can see there's a box colored in for when that rubric and that symptom is produced by that remedy. And what I'm really looking for is a remedy that will have not just one or the other, but will actually have both. So you can see my top 5 here. We have belladonna, mercurius, buritacarb, hepar sulfuris, and sulfur. So we're down to 5, which is quite good. And honestly, as much as it would be awesome if we could have enough symptoms that there was only a single remedy that in my repertory covered all of those symptoms, that's usually not the case. This is more typical, where we're able to narrow the field from what we started with, a couple thousand, down to 5, even 10 to 15 is pretty good. And the point here is that now, so say there's no more symptoms in the throat at all, now we're going to go to those other symptoms that I talked about, which can be useful in homeopathy, which conventional approaches do not take into account. Things such as sensitivity to weather, changes in mood or temperament, changes in appetite or thirst level since this whole thing started, or certainly even changes in other symptoms in the body since it started that may not be directly related to the throat. So as an example, in this case, if the person needed belladonna, I would expect that in addition to the throat pain, they would be running a really high fever, maybe a flushed red face, very angry and having some rage symptoms. And with this hypothetical case, we have none of that, so it's not likely belladonna. For mercurius, the types of symptoms that people will often have, not exclusively, but we may see some excessive sweating, some excessive perspiration, excessive salivation, perhaps bone pains, especially worse in the nighttime. And without that, in this case, we won't be given it. For buritacarb, we might expect to see a lot of newfound timidity, anxiety, shyness since this all started. For hepar sulfuris, sensitivity of the skin to touch, causing a lot of pain, or really strong sensitivity to cold air, cold winds. And for sulfur, there may be lots of burning pains, lots of itchiness, especially burning in the feet to the point where they have to stick them out of the covers at night when they sleep. Now, I would go through those types of questions with the person, and so say in this example, they do have that newfound burning in the soles at night when they sleep. That would lead me to sulfur being probably the best remedy for them in this case. Now, another example of new symptoms in a case that can be helpful for prescribing a homeopathic remedy would be changes in the mental emotional disposition. So in this case, let's look at what would happen if, in addition to the sore throat, this person also simultaneously developed a very intense anxiety about the health of their family, kind of out of the blue. And for a lot of us, we would think, well, that's not useful, that's not helpful, that's not anything to do with the sore throat. But in homeopathy, these types of changes in a person, whether they're physical or mental emotional, are very helpful. So in this example, we'll go to the mind section. We will look for anxiety and we'll characterize it, and we'll say anxiety around health, okay, and now about specifically the loved ones. So 2 remedies in this rubric, mercurius and hepar sulfuris. And so now we're narrowing the field even further, and we can say, well, let's read between mercurius and read between hepar sulfuris and now see which one of those remedies better fits this case as a whole. Now, that's an example of what would we call an acute situation where it's just a sore throat. In a complex and more chronic situation where there's multiple chief concerns and multiple long-lasting symptoms, things get a lot more complicated and they require a lot more time and detail to solve. So let's look at an example of a chronic condition where a person has, say, 3 chief concerns: terrible abdominal swelling, terrible headache, and irritability since all this started. So already off the bat, I can tell you that for something like a headache, we need a lot more details in order to help the person. So in this case, we take the more detailed case of a headache and we find the location of the pain is all through the head, but the sensation is a very specific kind of pulsating and throbbing pain. So let's find these symptoms in the repertory and see where just these 3 symptoms alone get us started in this case. So we'll go to the abdomen section and we'll say we have swelling, right? So 244 remedies in this rubric that can cover it. Now let's add in the headache and the specific type of headache that they have. We have pain, headache in a pulsating character. 296 remedies, I can cover that. We'll add it in. And then, as we said before, the change in the mental emotional disposition with the onset of these symptoms is always a really important factor in finding the right remedy. And in this case, we have irritability since it started. So we go to the mind section, we go to irritability. And it's a large rubric, but we'll add it in for now just as a demonstration. So 479 remedies. So what we have here in this more complex chronic case is we have the 3 symptoms in, but as you can see, all of these remedies cover the case as we have it right now. And actually, if you count this up, it amounts to 134 remedies. And we can see really that we're gonna need a lot more details about each of these symptoms, such as can we more carefully find the location of the abdominal swelling? And can we more carefully find out things that make that symptom any better or any worse? That will help narrow the field. For the headache, same kind of question. Can we more carefully characterize things that trigger it, whether that's time of day, time of night, specific foods, odors, movement, etc. And once it's triggered, can we find anything that makes that headache any better, give some relief? Those things will also help us narrow the field. And again, for the irritability, it's a huge symptom, as we can see, of 479 remedies. So if we can more carefully figure out what types of things are triggering the irritability, what types of situations is this person now most irritable about or upset with, again, that will help us narrow the field. And then zooming out from these main concerns, what about them as a whole person is also unique and different, especially since everything started here regarding their temperature sensitivities, their food desires, their appetite, their thirst level, their sensitivity to weather or time of day or seasons. All these types of things that seemingly would not be helpful in a case like this actually serve to be fundamentally helpful for narrowing the field and finding the single remedy that best fits this person and their case. Now, it is important to know that this process of using the repertory is just the first step in the total process of choosing the right remedy for a person. Once we have a small group of remedies that seem to best fit the case, the next step is to go to what's called a materia medica, which is a book containing all of the symptoms those remedies can help with, and then read the different remedies to see which one best fits the case. One of the materia medicas I use most frequently is Allen's Encyclopedia, which is 8,448 pages long and contains information on 1,039 unique remedies. Now, a lot of remedies contain between 2,000 and 4,000 symptoms from which we as practitioners will dig through in order to find symptoms that best fit our client's case, much like looking for a diamond in the rough. So the homeopathic practitioner first has to know how to navigate a complete case, which is what I described in the last video, in order to get all the information that will ultimately be needed for finding the right remedy. Once we have the complete case, we next go to the repertory and navigate through the several thousand pages in there to pick out the specific symptoms that best match what our client is describing to us, in order to ideally narrow down the group of remedies from a couple thousand at the start to hopefully between, say, 5 and 15 at the end. Once we have this now smaller group of remedies, we read through the primary sources of those remedies that are found in the materia medica in order to best distinguish which remedy out of that smaller group best fits our client's case. The ultimate goal is then to arrive at the single homeopathic remedy, which is the best match possible out of all of the remedies in our arsenal that will best be able to stimulate the healing response within our client. This process is certainly time intensive as a practitioner, but it is truly the best and most thorough approach a homeopath can take when it comes to recommending a remedy for somebody, and it is what gives us the best chance of success. And I would say this is the essence of a personalized approach. Now, a really important question that a lot of you might be having is, well, how does the disease diagnosis itself fit into this? An important part of homeopathy is that even though it's always the main, most bothersome and consistent symptoms a person is coming in with that we are seeking to see improvement in, when it comes to actually choosing the remedy we will recommend at any point, the name of the disease diagnosis itself does not really play much of a role. And what I mean by that is it's never the name of the disease diagnosis itself which predetermines the remedy we will use, but rather the unique and specific way that that disease is expressing itself through the client or the patient who we are working with. Another kind of corollary aspect of this is that because each homeopathic remedy has hundreds and many have even several thousands of symptoms that they can help with, many times we will use the same homeopathic remedy for very different diseases, just depending again on the unique presentation of the person in front of us. A good example of a remedy used in this way would be the homeopathic remedy phosphorus. Now, over the centuries since phosphorus has been in our materia medica, it's been used very well in more chronic respiratory affections such as chronic asthma, chronic bronchitis. It's been used in more chronic mental emotional complaints such as long-term anxiety and depression. And it's also been used throughout the years for more acute and infectious-based diseases such as pneumonia. Again, it's all about taking a whole person approach and individualizing the remedy recommendations based on the person in front of us. And another question in this category that I come across often is, what about for a person who is really suffering with health conditions, but their symptoms have not landed them in any one distinct disease diagnosis? So they're left without a diagnosis, but they're still suffering. Where do they fit in here? Since the process of individualization that I've outlined so far is followed for every client or every patient, no matter what they're coming in with, whether they have a well-defined disease diagnosis or not, homeopathy can still be extremely helpful for people whose health concerns do not fit in any conventional disease diagnosis name. This is because it doesn't rely on the name of a disease diagnosis in order for a specific remedy to be recommended, and it also doesn't rely on having a specific disease diagnosis for the right remedy to stimulate our own body's healing processes and ultimately bring some relief. And with literally thousands of homeopathic remedies at our disposal, we're never truly out of options. This brings us full circle back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the video regarding precision health. And I would say, based on all of this, that homeopathy is the oldest and yet the most advanced form of personalized health that we have right now. So, to summarize this video, first, I believe that searching for a silver bullet cure, whether that's a specific medicine or a specific supplement that will heal all persons with a single disease, is likely to end in disappointment. Instead, I think the future of medicine is more to be found in further and further taking a more precision health approach. Second, the process of taking a complete homeopathic intake, which I outlined in my last video, and carefully analyzing the case in order to choose the remedy that I outlined in this video is a great example of taking a personalized approach to health, and homeopathy has been doing this for over 200 years. Third, because homeopathy is such a unique and different approach from everything else out there, I think there is still hope for people who either have a disease diagnosis which has not yet been helped, as well as for people who are suffering but do not fit into any classical disease diagnosis. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please leave it a like, as that does help it reach more people. And stay tuned for my next video in the Homeopathy 101 series, where I'll cover the types of substances used that make up the more than 1,000 different remedies in our repertoire. Take care.